Hello everybody, welcome back to Creating Hanley. I am framed by half rectangle triangles. This is a half rectangle triangle. Here we are. So in today's episode, we are learning how to make half rectangle triangles. All year, we've been making half square triangles. This time, we're making half rectangle triangles. They're called HRTs. Half rectangle triangle, not HSTs, which are half square triangles. So let's figure out how we make these. Basically, you are making two rectangles 50%. So this is 5 inches. If you have like a charm pack or something, a 5-inch square, cut it in half. So 2.5 inches. And then this is going to be 2.5 inches. So this is 2.5 inches. This is 5 inches. Okay? So I'm going to show you. They look like this. If you put two together, this is a charm. Now these are different. But two of these that I have cut, this equals a 5-inch square. You cut that in half, that's 2.5 inches. This is going to be 2.5 inches. This is going to be 5.5 inches. So whatever your length is, you want to have that for your width. Okay? So if you have a 10-inch square, half of that is 5. If you have a 6-inch square, half of that is 3. My cat is trying to get my attention, and she's succeeding. Oh, there's the other one. 2 cats. So, what I have done is I've just cut 5-inch squares out of 4 different types of fabric for one side, and then the other side I cut 5-inch squares out of just this blue. So, just this blue. So, I had 4 5-inch squares just out of this blue. And then I split those in half, and now I have my rectangles. Again, 5 inches by 2.5. You have your charm pack. It's just a 5-inch block. Cut it in half. Simple. Okay? So this is actually going to be my background. I'm using a dark background today, and then I'm using these oranges and yellows to try it. Hopefully it'll be a pop. So it'll look like that. Now, let's figure out how to do this. I want to do it an easy way, but it might get a little bit directionally challenging in your brain. So we're going to try this 4 times, and we're going to practice it 4 times. So I already have a couple of these made up so you can see what they look like. And this is untrimmed, so you see like the dog ears on them and everything still. All I did was sew these together, and I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see that's a pretty big seam allowance on the back. So 1/4 inch seam allowance with a 5 by 2.5. Okay, so let's get it to this stage. Now I pinned and I drew a line, so I know where to sew along. This is my cut line. I already drew my cut line. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of this line, okay? But let me take you down to the activity surface. So I'm going to set these aside. This is what we want them to end up like. Now you can see one is opposite of the other. So one side is opposite of the other, and we want to make sure that we keep them that way, because if we cut them all the same, if we sew them all the same, they will all look like this, which is fine. But when you put them together, they're not. So you're gonna have a tree. We want to kind of make a triangle. Anyway, you're going to see what I mean in a bit. So, to get it to this stage, take one of your backgrounds and one of your colors. Now, I want to make these two triangles opposite. So I have the same color of fabric right here. And what you want to do is take your background and then lay your color triangle on top of that. Now, I have my triangle going this way. So I want to do the opposite. Now, what you want to do is take opposite corners. This corner and this corner. And then you're going to lay that on opposite corners of your triangle face side down. So right sides together. Okay, so pretty sides together. So you're going to line up this corner and this corner. So it's like if you've cut them in half, right? You're going to line up this corner and then you're going to slide this top piece over enough, passing up this corner so that this corner matches this corner. I hope that makes sense. I know I'm saying this corner instead of right and left and right and left. But let me do this again in slow-mo. So I take this apart. Here's my right side down, my right side up. My background, the right side is up. My color fabric, the right side is down. Or my print or whatever I'm highlighting. Slide this over. These corners match. Now we're going to pivot. So you can put your finger right there. I'm going in slow-mo. So we know, slow motion. We're going to pass up this corner and take this bottom corner to the opposite bottom corner. Okay? Just like that. So these corners match. Now make sure those points match exactly. Now I'm going to draw my diagonal line. And where's my pencil? Alright, I'm just going to take my straight edge and precisely match up this corner and this corner. Now this point of my pencil is kind of dull. So I want to allow that space. Okay, so that width of this pencil tip will take up space. So I want to make sure that I align up my pencil tip and leave enough space on my straight edge so that the line is exactly from corner to corner. And there's my line. And now I'm going to pop in a couple of pins, being very careful that I do not move this fabric because I really don't want it to move at all. So if you can, very gently put in a couple of these pins. Try to keep it away from your drawn line as much as possible. Make sure it goes through both layers so I know my pin is on the bottom. Okay, both layers. Try not to distort the fabric at all. And now if I look at these two pieces, they are opposite. So I have my background is face up, and you can see the background is straight like this. Now these colors are opposite, which is exactly what you want. So if you're using all of the same color, it's not going to matter. Just have half of your fabric like this and half of your fabric like that. If you're using multiples like I am, it still is going to matter because you still want half of your fabric. So I have 8 squares. So put 4 this way and 4 that way. Or I'm not squares. I have 4 rectangles. I only made 4 5-inch squares that I cut in half. That gave me 8 rectangles. Okay? Sorry I misspoke there. 8 rectangles. So put 4 of your rectangles this way and put 4 of your rectangles this way. Now, it doesn't matter. You could do 16, you could do 20, you could do however many you want. I'm just starting with 4 5-inch squares, cut those in half. Now I have 8 rectangles. 8 of my background rectangles and 8 of my print rectangles. Okay? So, make sure if you're using so just make sure that you're using they all should look like this. Okay? Now, let's take it over to the machine and start sewing. I have white thread in here. And I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm lining up my line. And you can't use an edge or anything on here because of the way the fabric goes. You cannot use a guide edge. You just have to use your presser foot edge. And you can use either the presser foot edge or the line on the presser foot, depending on what type of presser foot you have. And then I'm just going to go for it. Now, if you need to, slow it down a little bit. Make sure you follow that line very carefully. And I'm not going to cut my thread, but I'm going to leave my needle down. I'm going to lift my presser foot, and then I'm going to swing this around and give myself a little extra thread there, and then place the presser foot measurement directly on that line where I need it to go. Now, I'm going to remove this pin because two things. I'm going to remove both pins because, one, that pin was already there, but two, I have now secured both fabrics to each other, so it's not going to shift anymore. So I'm confident that it's not going to shift, and the line is going to stay the same. Now, the fabric is itself not going to shift, but I may move the fabric around inadvertently. I'm going to cut this thread and remove it. Now, you can see, maybe you can see, this line right here is a little wonky. This, where is it? Right here. This line right here. I put my finger in the way and I shifted that stitch line a little bit, so it's a little bit wonky. That may affect the end result. So you can see right here, this line, maybe you can see. Here we go. So this line right here is a little bit wonky. If I was being very precise, I would rip out this stitch and then redo it. That may actually affect my final project. Yeah, it may or may not. So let's set this one aside and do the same thing with this. So be very precise. Put your your drawn line underneath whatever edge you're using and go slowly. If pins are in the way, then you stop, remove the pin, and then keep going. It's very important that you keep your sewn line directly on the drawn line. Okay, and I just spin this around. I don't cut my fabric. Now again, I can remove my pin. Keep that line precise. And once you're done there, you can cut the thread and remove it. Now you can see these are now sewn together. And I have opposites. I have them going in opposite directions. Okay, now we're going to follow this line. You can either use scissors or you can use your rotary cutter. And for one, I'm going to take my fabric scissors and I'm just going to slice right along the edge here. And I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can see, maybe you can see on the blue side. See how a little bit wonky that is? That 1/4 inch seam allowance is kind of big. So, excuse me. So let's bring this over to the ironing surface. I'm going to set my seam and then I'm going to open this to the dark side. Now, if you want to, because it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance, feel free to open up your seams. And if you do that, because there may be a lot of bulk in here, you will actually cut down on the amount of bulk in your quilt or your quilt block. your quilt or your quilt block. Okay, so you can do that. I have just simply been ironing to the dark side. So again, I'm going to set my seam. So when you set your seam, you just iron and then you flip over. Being very careful because this is now on a bias. So you want to be careful that you don't stretch this fabric. And I'm using only hot. I'm not using steam. Okay. All right. So now it looks like this. And if you wanted to, you can make a really cool pattern like this and sew this back together, and that will create like kind of like a star, right? The blue will kind of create like a star pattern-ish. Now we're going to do the same thing on here. Remember, this is just practice. We're going slow. So, cut along the line, the drawn line. Set your seams. Open to the dark side if you like. Or your color side or whatever works. Your background, yeah, whatever works for you. And then, or you can open the seams. And then be very careful that you're not stretching the bias. Okay. So now, so now it looks like that. Opposites, right? There you go. Cool. So that's one way that you can line them up in a quilt if you like. Another way is to move these around a little bit. Take this to here and this to here. And now do you see how you have a star point? Or an arrow? Or something to that effect, right? Now again, I did not cut off these dog ears. It's not trimmed at all. So you can line up your fabric like that, which is what I'm going to do in another project. So you will probably see these again in a video coming soon. All right, but we're just getting the practice. We're just getting the hang of how to make these half triangle or half rectangle triangles. Okay, so now if you want to get scrappy, now's the time. You can bring out your other scraps and you can say, all right, that's there. Now I'm going to match this up and I'm going to do that. Just like that. Pretty cool, huh? Or if you have an orange or like a darker one, just a contrast there, then you could do something like that. And that's pretty cool. All right, so let's try this again. We are taking our background. Take your background and then take your top print face down, background face up, top print face down. Put these two top corners together, pivot, pass up this corner, and use this bottom corner to over on the far side. Okay? Like so. Now we draw on the top, diagonal to diagonal, corner to corner. Okay? Get your straight edge, and whatever drawing utensil you're using, remember how fat or thin this point is adds space. So you want to make sure that you get that absolutely perfect at the top and the bottom. You want to line that up perfectly. Now I do not pin here yet because the pin will get in the way. So I have to be very careful not to distort or move the fabric. Even when I'm drawing on it, you want to use enough pressure to create a line, but not enough that you're distorting the fabric. And you want to use a little bit of pressure, so press down on your straight edge here so that you create enough pressure that the fabric does not move. And again, very carefully pin so that your fabric doesn't shift. Make sure you get the bottom. I tend to miss the bottom. All right, so there's that one. And you can also double check, did the fabric shift? And if it did, you just take the pin out and repin. And then make sure you get the bottom, both layers of fabric, flatten that out, make sure it is flat and in the right position. Take it over to your sewing machine, and if you want, you can start with a leader. Make sure you line up this drawn edge to whatever line that you want to on your presser foot. Go ahead and start. And then once you start, you're okay to take out both pins now if you like. If they get in the way, depending on how big or small your square is, your rectangle. You know, and if the rectangle is even smaller than this one, then definitely take out the pins once you have a couple of stitches in there, because that will tack down both layers and hopefully keep everything in place. And again, you don't have to sew very quickly. Just sew at a nice even pace until you get the hang of it. And then you can speed up. Like, I'm just going to speed this up just a little bit right here. And there we go. All right. And now, this looks like that. And hopefully, did I do this already? No. Okay, so I look at this one, and I look at this one, and I see, uh-oh, it's the same way, but I didn't sew this one yet, okay? So, if I want opposites, I have to make sure that I sew them opposite. So, this is not opposite. This is exactly the same, which means the triangles will come out the same every time. So you're going to have triangles that come out like this 4 times. Not just 2, but 4 times. So if you want that, great. But I don't want that. I want opposites. I want them like this. Okay? So that means that I didn't sew this yet. I need to double check. And I'm going to flip this around. Now my pencil drawing is off. Oops, I want to do it this way. Here we go. So again, if you're doing the opposite, what you can do is switch these around, put your background up, your print down, take it on this side, pivot, and then pass up this corner, remember, and then take it all the way to the other side. Okay? So it looks like this. Now my pencil drawing is incorrect. Fortunately, it's just pencil, and that's fine. So now I'm going to change the direction of the pencil drawing. Mark that and mark this. Pin this down pretty tight and then make a new drawing. This is the one I'm going to follow. I'm not going to get confused because I know where I'm supposed to sew. But I am going to put these pins in, maybe just one this time, just to hold this down, okay? And I'm going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to sew right along here. So I'm going to start this way, just to keep that pin in. Actually, yeah. Keep the pin in for a little bit, and then remove it. swing it around. You see that? All right. Very nice. Now, take this out. Check it out. I sewed 1/4 inch on either side, and you want to cut those apart. I didn't do a very good job of cutting straight. I didn't do a very good job of cutting straight. But that's okay because it's just a seam allowance and nobody's really going to see it anyway. Set your seams. Iron. And here they are. And there you go. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Trim. And again, I didn't trim off any of the dog ears. I just left them. Set your seam. And then open. And again, you can open the seam allowances if you like. And here we go here. Okay, so now we've created that potential, right? Or you can take your scrappies, make it scrappy, and remove this and put that there, and then do this and put that there. Nice. Okay. We will trim these up. So you just want to make sure that this line is straight, and then you can trim a little bit of that off, and this line is straight and trim a little bit of that off. And before you put them in a block, you can do that if you like. It makes it a little bit easier to sew because otherwise you have 4 pieces of fabric up here or more sewing together. All right. Now, let's look at, okay, these are already done. So, I want to check out this. And it looks like that. So, when I take my next piece, I probably want to take it this way. Oh. All right, so did you see how I did that? So pivot, start here, pivot, and pass up this corner and take this corner all the way to the opposite side. You will know because if you do it wrong, your corners will not match up. So if you're trying to do something like this, your corners are not going to match up. If you're trying to do maybe like this, it's not going to match. If you come over here and like try to do something like this, it's not matching, right? So you will know when your corners match. So if you're trying to do this, it's not working. So take it all the way over. Make sure you pivot on here, and then this will match perfectly. It is a perfect fit. That corner and that corner meet up exactly on the spot, okay? So there will be no mistake. There will be no like fabric not, matching each other, not cooperating. It will be exactly right. And then how do you know which way? Well, you're not going to draw a line this way because that's not really what you want. If you draw a line this way and you sew a line this way, this part is not under any fabric up here, and neither is this part. So you want to make sure you're catching both layers of fabric the entire length of your rectangle. I mean, that probably sounds pretty obvious, but it's just another hint. It's just another helping guide. So if you start putting your fabric under and there's only this little piece under your needle for like, you know, 1.5 inches, you're like, well, it's not sewing anything. Exactly. It's not sewing anything together. So realign your rectangle, draw your line, pop in your pin. I'm going to move all these out of the way. And then I only have one more set to go. So I'm not going to pop in a pin now. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Maybe I'll speed up a little bit here. So when I speed up, that makes the camera shake a little bit. So I'm going to take it back down so it doesn't shake as much maybe. Okay, now I'm going to leave that in, and I'm going to take this, and I forget which way I did this original one. I might be able to figure it out like this. So if I did, if I did that, is that the same thing? And if I draw this over, yes, it's the same thing. So I'm going to take this way and like that. So now when I sew my line and I pretend there's a sewn line here, if I do this, I can see this is the opposite. So I'm good. I'm good on this angle right here. But I am going to draw a line just to make sure that I follow it exactly. And I'm chain piecing right now. This is already in. And I did not cut the thread yet. So I'm just chain piecing. And chain piecing means you don't cut the thread, you just sew multiple pieces without breaking your thread in between. Follow that line. Now, this is kind of getting in my way, so I am going to cut this apart and make sure that stays out of my way. Finish my rectangle, and then I cut the thread right here. This is the last one I'm doing. So, cut along your drawn line. And again, you can use your rotary blade. I'm just doing this on film, and I don't want to move the camera around too much. So I'm just using my scissors, my fabric scissors, to cut these apart. It doesn't matter. However you cut them, you could chew them apart if you want to. I wouldn't recommend that, but however you cut them apart is up to you. Set the seam. And again, be careful of the bias because now these are on a diagonal. And let's see if I did this right. Did I do this right? Yes, I did. There we go. So those are opposites now. I definitely did that right. Okay. Set your seam. Can't even see. Set the seam. And open it up. Set the seam. And open it up. Okay. And again, I'm just using a hot dry iron. I'm not using steam. And one more, we're going to do this one. Set your seam. Open. Be careful about the bias. And there we go. And then you can make it super scrappy. And if you want to, sew these together. And then you would just take this edge and this edge. You can trim off your little dog ears up here if you like. So you can trim those off. And just for giggles, I'm going to sew these together. Now, you want to, if you want to, you can change your, if you have already opened your seam allowances, that's fine. You can put these together nicely. You can nest them nicely if your seam allowances are open. But because I have the seam allowances going the same way, I might want to change the direction of one of these seam allowances so that I can nest. Some people say nestle, so you can nest or nestle these seams together right here. And once they nestle, they're kind of like locked in. And then once they're locked in, they fit very nicely. So those lines line up perfectly, right? Okay. Now we want to not sew on the background. We want to sew on the color side or your print side. And then I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance the whole way. And I just did a little back stitch there to kind of lock that down, just in case, so it doesn't come apart, because I might want to use this in a future project, but not right at the moment. So if I don't do a back stitch, then this can come apart easily. So now look, you've met the seams right there at the top. All those points came together, and now you have a new block. So this is the beginning of a star point, of a new star point for a future video that I will do soon. But anyway, so what we did was we practiced making half rectangle triangles. Half rectangle triangles. These are all half rectangle triangles. And I made mine all scrappy. So I hope that helps you today. Learn a new skill, learn a new technique, a half rectangle triangle. And then when you put them together, they look like that. A half rectangle triangle, guys. Half rectangle triangle. Say that 5 times real fast. All right. Thanks for sewing along with me. And leave a comment if you want to try these half rectangle triangles in some more quilts, more projects. All right. I'll see you on the next video. Stay tuned, because we're going to really put this into a project. All right, guys. Have a great practice session. We'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.